What if the man you saved with your own hands woke up needing more than just saving? That was the question Georgia James never expected to face on a quiet August evening in the Montana Territory, when the sun sank behind the Bitterroot Mountains and a half-dead cowboy fell off his horse right into her yard. Georgia had just stepped out with a bucket of water when she heard a dull thud, sharp enough to startle the chicken scratching near the porch. She spun around and saw a man collapsed in the dust, his horse trembling beside him. His hat had rolled away, and his body lay twisted like he had fought to stay in the saddle until the last second. She dropped the bucket and ran. The closer she got, the colder her stomach turned. The cowboy's eyes were half open but unfocused, glazed with fever. Sweat soaked his shirt, drying to salt along the seams, and blood clung to his brow in a thin, cracked line. When he tried to breathe, the sound came out rough, like broken glass scraping his lungs. "Help me!" Georgia shouted toward the porch out of habit. But the yard was quiet. Of course, no one came. The only other souls on the homestead were her 2 young sons, tucked into bed early in the small room off the kitchen. No man had lived here in 4 long years, not since her husband rode away and never came back. Georgia knelt beside the cowboy and slipped her hands under his arms. He was heavy, burning hot, and barely conscious, but she dragged him across the dirt anyway, step by step, grunting under his weight. She got him up the porch, through the open door, and into the cool shade of her front room. By the time she eased him onto the narrow bed, her arms shook from the effort. His boots were caked with road dust. His shirt was torn at the shoulder, the fabric stiff with dried blood. When she pushed up the sleeve, her breath caught. His left arm was swollen red, the skin angry with infection. "You're not dying on my floor," she whispered. "I've buried enough." He didn't reply. His eyes fluttered shut. Georgia worked through the night. She boiled water on the stove, wiped sweat from his brow, cleaned the wound until he groaned through clenched teeth, and poured cool willow bark tea down his throat in small, careful sips. Every time his breathing hitched, she feared she would lose him. Every time his fever surged, she prayed it would break. By dawn, his breaths grew steadier. Georgia sat beside the bed, elbows on her knees, feeling the weight of exhaustion settle into her bones. A tiny hand tugged her skirt. "Ma," whispered her 5-year-old son, Elias, his curls tangled from sleep. "Who is he?" "I don't know yet," Georgia said softly, brushing his hair back. "But we're going to help him." Elias nodded and went back to the cot he shared with little Samuel. The cowboy didn't wake that day, or the next. Georgia kept at it anyway, changing the compresses, whispering steady words she didn't think he could hear. She talked to him like the sound alone might anchor him to the world. She told him he was safe. She told him he wasn't alone. On the 3rd morning, as she leaned over him to check his fever, a hand shot up and caught her wrist. Georgia gasped. His eyes opened, pale blue, clear, sharp. "You're not an angel," he rasped. "No," she said, startled. "You're alive." He blinked, confused. "Where am I?" "My farm, near Hamilton." He tried to sit up. Pain flashed across his face and he fell back with a rough groan. "Don't be foolish," she said. "You're not going anywhere." His gaze found hers again. There was something steadier there now, something searching. "You nursed me," he said. "Yes." She stepped away to fold the cloth and rinse it in the basin, feeling his eyes follow her. When she turned back, he spoke again. "My name's Dane Laram. Used to ride for the C&H out of Helena, got caught in a flash flood, lost my horse, walked for days after." "You're lucky you made it here," Georgia said. "I know." He tried to sit up again, slower this time, but she stopped him with a firm hand on his shoulder. "Lie back. You still have a fever." He obeyed, but a faint smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. "You always this bossy?" "I have to be. I've got 2 boys and a farm to run." Dane's eyes drifted toward the small boots by the door. "You married?" "No." He nodded once, saying nothing more. The days passed in a blur. Dane's fever broke. His strength returned in small, careful pieces. Whenever he felt steady enough, he helped where he could. He mended a broken fence rail with one hand, hauled water, held Samuel on his knee when the child cried after falling on the steps. Georgia watched him with guarded eyes, unsure what to make of this man who had stumbled into her world and begun fitting into it like he belonged. One evening she found him on the porch rail watching the sun bleed down behind the hills. He turned as she stepped outside. "You always do this alone?" he asked. She nodded. "You shouldn't have to." "I've managed," she said. "I know," Dane replied softly. "But that doesn't mean you should." Georgia sat beside him, her heart tightening in a way she didn't expect. The sky was painted in warm streaks of gold. And for a long moment, neither spoke. Then he turned to her, eyes deeper now. "I remember your voice," he said. "From those nights, I was half gone. You kept telling me to stay. You were burning up." "I know," he swallowed. "Georgia, I didn't just wake up needing a nurse." She looked at him, holding her breath. "I woke up needing you." Georgia did not move at first. The wind brushed her braid over her shoulder, and the orange light of sunset warmed the porch boards between them, but all she felt was her heart beating in a way it had not in years. Dane waited, his hands still, his breath steady, as if he was afraid one wrong word would push her away. "You don't know me," she finally said. "I know enough," he answered. "You saved my life. You cared for my arm like it mattered. You took in a stranger when most folks would have shut their door. That doesn't mean you owe me anything." "I don't feel like I owe you," he said, voice low. "I feel like I found something I didn't know I was missing." Georgia looked away, her eyes fixed on the wheatgrass swaying in the distance. She thought of the years she had spent waking before dawn, hauling water, tending fields, raising her boys with nothing but grit and prayer. She had learned how to live without expecting help, without expecting anyone to stay. Inside, a soft cry broke the moment. "Samuel again," Georgia said with a tired smile. Dane stood with her. "Let me help." She hesitated, then nodded. When they stepped inside, Samuel reached for Dane without fear. Dane lifted him gently, rocking him slow until the child's breaths evened out. Watching them, something loosened inside Georgia, something she had kept knotted tight for far too long. Over the next few days, Dane grew stronger. He split wood, hauled feed, and repaired the crooked fence along the east field. He moved slower because of his arm, but he did not complain. Elias followed him everywhere, asking endless questions about horses, rivers, storms, and anything else he could think of. Dane never pushed him away. He answered every one. One afternoon, after repairing a broken hinge on the chicken coop, Dane sat on the steps wiping sweat from his brow. Georgia handed him a cup of cool water. "You work hard for someone who's supposed to be resting." "Resting doesn't suit me," he said with a grin. "Besides, this place needs 2 sets of hands." She sat beside him. "It's needed that for a long time." "You did it anyway," he said. "That says something." She didn't reply. Compliments were something she wasn't used to receiving. That night, after the boys fell asleep beneath patched quilts, Georgia found Dane sitting by the lantern in the kitchen, sharpening the edge of the draw knife. "You should be in bed," she told him. He looked up, eyes soft. "I slept enough for a lifetime while I was sick." She leaned against the doorway. "Dane, you said something the other night." His jaw tightened slightly. "I meant it." "You woke up needing me," she said quietly, "but you were half delirious. Fever can make a man say things." He set the knife aside. "Georgia, when I opened my eyes and saw you, it was the first time in months I felt like I was somewhere I should stay. Not just somewhere safe, somewhere right." Her breath caught. She wasn't ready to answer, not yet, so she turned to start drying the dishes. But Dane rose and stepped beside her, helping without a word. Shoulder to shoulder, the kitchen warm with firelight, she felt a steady peace she had not known since before her husband left. In the morning, Dane was already outside when she woke. She found him by the barn, mending a broken gate rail. "You don't have to do all that," she said. "I want to," he answered simply. She watched him, the early sun brightening the edges of his dark hair, his hands sure even with only one strong arm to work with. "Are you planning on moving on once you're healed?" she asked quietly. He paused, lowering the hammer. I used to think I had to keep drifting, he said. Didn't matter where, just away from the past. But when I'm here, he looked at her, eyes steady. I don't feel like running anymore. Georgia felt her chest tighten. She wasn't sure if it was fear or hope. Dane, she said, voice softening, I've lived a long time not expecting anyone to stay. I'm not your past, he answered. And I'm not him. His meaning was clear, her husband, the man who promised to come back and never did. Later that evening, the boys helped Dane gather the last of the firewood before sunset. Elias carried small branches in both arms. Samuel toddled behind with a single stick. When they reached the house, Georgia stood at the doorway watching them. You're good with them, she said. Dane shrugged lightly. Kids know when someone cares. They don't need explanations. Inside, they ate together for the first time. Real supper, real laughter, real warmth. And as night settled, Georgia felt something she had buried rise up again. The feeling of a home filled by more than just chores and silence. After the boys were asleep, Dane stepped onto the porch. Georgia followed him. The night was still, the sky brushed with stars, the air cool against their skin. I didn't come here on purpose, Dane said quietly, but I'm starting to believe I wasn't meant to keep wandering, not after finding this place, not after finding you. She looked at him, heart full and trembling. You don't even know if I want you here, she whispered. He stepped closer. Then tell me, he said. Should I stay? Quote, the question hung between them, fragile and real. Georgia placed her hand against his chest, feeling the steady rise and fall beneath her fingertips. Yes, she said, stay. Dane exhaled like he had been holding his breath for days, and when he pulled her into his arms, it wasn't rushed, it wasn't hungry. It was steady and warm, like something long missing finally returning home. The next morning brought a soft gray light over the Montana fields. The wind carried a hint of fall, and the cottonwoods near the creek whispered as if the land itself felt something new settling in. Georgia woke before the boys, as she always did, expecting the familiar weight of worry to greet her. But this time, the house felt different. Warmer, steadier, as if someone else's presence filled the empty spaces she had grown used to carrying alone. Dane was already outside when she stepped onto the porch. He was stacking the last of the firewood under the shed roof, moving with slow care to protect his healing arm. He looked up when he heard her. Morning, he said. You're supposed to be taking it easy. I will, he replied, lifting another log into place. Right after I make sure you don't break your back before winter. Georgia shook her head but couldn't fight the smile pulling at her mouth. He wasn't doing too much. He was doing what felt right to him. Helping. Making himself part of the place, part of her world. After breakfast, the boys followed Dane into the yard, eager to help with whatever small chores he gave them. Elias marched around carrying sticks like he was on official duty. Samuel held onto Dane's pant leg every time he stopped, his tiny hand clutching the fabric, as if afraid Dane might disappear if he let go. Georgia watched them from the doorway, something soft and almost painful blooming in her chest. Later that afternoon, Dane stood with her by the garden fence. The sun hung low, brushing gold across the wheatgrass. She worked while he leaned against the rail, his arm finally out of its sling. You've rebuilt this whole place by yourself, Dane said. Had to. She wiped dirt from her palms. No one else was going to do it. He studied her for a long moment. You shouldn't have had to. Georgia met his eyes. I can take care of us. I know, he said. That's why staying means something. You don't need me, but I want to be here anyway. She swallowed, the words settling deep. That evening, after the boys had fallen asleep, Dane found her at the small table sorting dried beans. The lantern flickered between them. I want to ask you something, he said. George's hand stilled. All right. He stepped closer. When I woke in that bed, half out of my mind, all I could remember was your voice telling me to stay. I didn't know where I was. I didn't even know if I was still alive, but I knew I wasn't alone. You weren't, she whispered. I don't want to leave that feeling behind, he said. Not now, not ever. Georgia looked down at her hands, worn from work, stained by earth. When she lifted her eyes again, they shone with something that hadn't lived there in years. I don't want you to leave either. Dane exhaled softly. Then I want to build something with you. Slowly, steady, whatever you're ready for. She nodded once. Steady sounds good. Days passed, and the rhythm of their life began to shift, not suddenly, not loudly, but in small ways that changed everything. Dane fixed the broken gate. Georgia cooked enough supper for 4 without thinking. The boys followed him as if he had always been part of the home. One morning, Dane hitched the wagon and said, I need to ride into town. I should send word to the folks who might be wondering where I ended up. You're leaving? Elias asked, panic in his small voice. Dane knelt beside him. I'm riding into town, little man. Not leaving. I'll be back by supper. Quote, Georgia stood in the doorway, her arms folded tight until she saw the boys run after him, laughing when he swung them into the wagon bed for a short ride to the end of the lane. He returned before sunset. True to his word, true to the promise in his eyes. Weeks passed, and autumn crept in on a quiet wind. Dane's strength returned fully. He repaired the barn roof, chopped wood, helped Georgia store the last vegetables in the cellar, and taught Elias how to read the weather in the clouds. One evening, the first frost appeared on the fence posts, thin and white like a breath of winter. Georgia stood on the porch, wrapped in her shawl, while Dane stacked the final row of wood under the eaves. You're building a home here, she said gently. He straightened, brushing sawdust from his palms. No, he said, we're building one. He stepped closer to her. I don't want to be just a guest. I don't want to be someone who wandered in and wandered back out. I want to belong here. With you, with the boys. Georgia felt something deep and certain settle inside her. Then stay, she said. Stay for good. He reached for her hand, warm and firm. I will. Winter came early. Snow fell soft on the fields and rooftops, but inside the house there was warmth that hadn't been there before. The boys slept more peacefully. Georgia no longer woke, expecting to face the world alone. And Dane, with every small act, every plank fixed, every meal shared, every quiet moment on the porch beside her, became a part of their life like he had always belonged. One night, after tucking the boys in, Georgia stood beside the fire. Dane stepped behind her, his presence solid and sure. I didn't just survive because of you, he said softly. I lived because of you. She turned to face him, her eyes full, her heart unguarded. And now, she asked. He rested his forehead against hers. Now I'm staying, he said. As long as you'll have me. Georgia wrapped her arms around him, and in that warm, quiet room with snow settling softly outside, she knew this was no accident. No passing moment. No simple recovery. This was a beginning, and she welcomed it with her whole heart.